Today, I am talking with Meredith MacKenzie. She is a licensed clinical counselor and she is an intuitive eating coach. And we are going to be talking about the relationship with your body after loss. So, welcome, Meredith. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today. This is such an important topic for baby loss moms. And I know it's something I struggled with for a long time. And I'm not even sure I'm fully over it at this point, but it just is that distrust of your body and the, maybe eating differently because sometimes you find that you're punishing your body even. So would you first be willing to share your own story of loss?
Yeah, and thank you so much for having me. I think being able to talk in this format and talk to somebody else who's been through the same experience is just so, it's another step in my own healing journey and just a nice way to try to consolidate and make sense of everything. So my own story, and I do think that it's very much related to and important to the work that I do, started, back when I was younger and my relationship with my body, and that I really struggled with disordered eating. And though I was never clinically diagnosed, being a clinical counselor myself now can look back and say, I definitely suffered from an eating disorder, and it then progressed from there. And it took me quite a number of years to do my own healing and recovery from that. And, then I chose the career that I did because I felt so strongly about helping women in this area. And it was something that I honestly felt was behind me, that I had this great relationship with my body and that I saw my body in such a deeper way than maybe the average person does. And I felt very almost grateful that I had that relationship with my body. And yeah, I was just, going at life and met a wonderful partner and very excited to start a family together. And didn't think that we were going to experience the struggles that we did with conceiving and starting our own family. So I got married in 2018 and we quickly tried to start having a family. I'm, currently doing my PhD at the University of British Columbia. And so trying to fit that in between, the different stages of my degree. And we were just struggling and we're like, well, it's okay because if we don't conceive now, we're going to wait until this next milestone in the program and then we'll try again. And we ended up moving across the country. We live in Canada. We moved across the country for part of my residency and still weren't conceiving. And the pandemic hits. And we're just thinking, okay, it's been this long. How long can we wait until we go and see somebody about this? And throughout that whole process, if anybody else has struggled with conceiving, I'm sure everyone's well aware of, the romance of the whole aspect just disappears. And you start to just like hyper focus on, well, did I take the prenatals and am I getting enough sleep? And did I time like the times that we're, being intimate with one another to try to make this happen? And am I like all of the things? Am I stressing too much? Because everyone then will say to you, oh, well, if you just relax, it'll happen. And, it doesn't happen. And
All
so,
of the experts in the world.
I felt like I became almost an expert in infertility to try to figure out what was going on and why it wasn't happening for me. And definitely there, I started to notice that my relationship with my body was being impacted and just feeling like I had so much control over all these other aspects of my life, my career, my education, and I don't have control over when I conceive a baby. And so by the time we ended up conceiving through IUI, we were very fortunate to have a very successful, like quick conception. And that was during the pandemic. And so, with all of that, we were just very happy because, appointments were very different. I was on my own. My partner wasn't able to come with me to my appointments. And as happy as I was, as excited as I was, that anxiety of when is that other shoe going to drop just kept, lingering. And we, the 12-week mark of pregnancy passed and we were excited about that and went out and bought a onesie and felt like we could celebrate and be looking forward to this. And then I think I just really tried to tell myself everything was going to be okay, that all of the struggles we had in the past were behind us. And at our anatomy scan, which was actually 2 weeks later, I think it was 22 weeks, because of the pandemic, again, they couldn't get us in. They identified that there was potentially something that, was amiss. And so I was referred to maternal fetal medicine. And there, again, going in happy-go-lucky, I get to see my baby again on this supersonic ultrasound machine. I'm so excited to see my baby. I was hit with a ton of bricks that he potentially had some very serious life-threatening and, life-altering, if he were to survive, post-birth complications. And that just sent us in a whirlwind for the rest of the pregnancy of what was going on for him. And yeah, it was a, up and down roller coaster of grieving. Will I potentially lose this baby? If he is born, what will his life and quality of life be like? What will that mean for my family? What will that mean for us continuing to expand our family? And if we decide to do that when we have a special needs child, and making some very hard decisions about what we wanted to do. And I don't want to say I was robbed of it, but it definitely changed my happiness with that pregnancy. All this to say, and we can get into it more, he was born perfectly healthy and there's nothing wrong with him. And so I love science, and sometimes I hate science because it really scared me. And it really impacted my relationship with him and my body while I was pregnant with him. He is now 16 months old, and we not unexpectedly, we were definitely trying, but given our previous history with trying to conceive, we tried to conceive again starting at his first birthday and very quickly became pregnant. Happy. It was a wonderful, 3 months leading up to announcing that we were pregnant, and that was Christmas time. And on New Year's Eve last year, 2022, I miscarried and spent New Year's Eve in the hospital finding out that my baby had passed, and that he had passed. Well, I say he, I just imagine he was a he. He had passed at 9 weeks, and that I'd been carrying him for 3 weeks without knowing. And so every time I think that I've healed this, betrayal or, relationship with my body, I find that there's another layer to uncover and another piece to just think about. And I say it now because now I'm, several months ahead of that. It's a gift. And it's also, just one of those more challenging pieces of life that you have to work on.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think what stood out to me in your story is really, you experienced the loss while you were pregnant with the child that continued to live and did become healthy, because once you get that news that they're not maybe going to live through it, or that something is, fatally wrong with them, it changes you. You just can never, and you can never be pregnant again, ever, without that fear. And, and then too, that you are questioning your own relationship with your body, even though it's something and this like the back of your hand. So how do you create a relationship with your body again after loss?
Yeah. For me, I think it's been like recognizing that relationship exists, and that I have had certain expectations of my body at different points in my life, and that I have maybe had unrealistic expectations and pushed it in ways that really hurt my body, from my eating disorder past. And, trying to really even beyond that recognize, like, well, what were the other things I asked of my body that were maybe unreasonable? I worked night shifts in mental health for 3 years, and that was so hard. And to say, like, wow, my body worked with me through that so that I could achieve my goals, and my body really sacrificed on my behalf. So I almost think of it as like its own separate relationship, almost like my body is its own person, and like how generous my body has been to me. And that's part of how I have just tried to recover that in general. But trying like the fertility piece and the, you know, maintaining a pregnancy piece has been so hard. So I think I have to recognize, and I think anybody probably has to recognize, that that relationship exists, and that we almost hold our bodies accountable as though they were a human being, when really they don't have that responsibility, right? It's not like our bodies are intentionally hurting us in any way or trying to misguide us or not give us all the information that we need. You know, even just more recently with this loss, the 3 weeks that I went pregnant, but not knowing I was pregnant. I remember we went on a little hike with my mother-in-law, and I was like, this pregnancy is so different. I don't even feel pregnant. Like, it's wonderful. And I remember just being so excited and happy about that. And later looking back and being like, you idiot, you weren't pregnant. That's why you didn't feel pregnant. And so just questioning all of those, you know, signals that my body would have given me if I were carrying a healthy pregnancy. Yeah. So it is still like almost like, well, my body didn't tell me, my body wasn't purposely hiding this from me. And I still need to treat it well. You know, there's the little things that we do where we, you know, try to punish. You mentioned punishing yourself or punishing your body when it doesn't cooperate or it doesn't, you know, go along with you. And one of the small things I remember doing was getting that news about my son and thinking, well, should I even be taking prenatal vitamins? Because, you know, if termination is something that they're really pushing and the doctors know best, is it worth taking prenatal vitamins? And having to stop myself and say, no, my body is important and my health is important, and carrying this baby to whatever, you know, point in time that I carry him is important. And so I am going to, you know, keep being there for my body however I can, and keep taking these supplements.
Where do you think those feelings come from? Is it from guilt? Is it from disappointment that our body didn't perform what it was supposed to be doing?
I wonder, like, it's amazing that you have this podcast and that you talk about these things, and that there's a space for women and, you know, any other partners, supportive partners, to go and listen. But we don't talk about this. And like the fact that you could terminate a baby after 20 weeks, I didn't even know that was a possibility. Yeah. It's just not talked about. And so I think we have this template in mind of this is what conceiving and starting a family looks like. Yeah. And when it doesn't fit that, you feel like you've done something wrong, or that your body is somehow wrong. And so I almost just feel like it's you didn't measure up. Your body wasn't what it was supposed to be. And that's like, at least for me, that's where it came from, of there must be something wrong with me.
And why wouldn't we think that, right? Mm-hmm. Because we only celebrate the babies that are born alive and born healthy, and we celebrate those moms and we celebrate those babies. But when something goes wrong, then we quickly just try to make it better. We quickly just try to shove it under the rug, and no one wants to talk about it because it is hard to understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's one of those things where there's so many opinions, and realistically it's your life and, you know, your family that is going through this. And so I remember even just when I was experiencing things with my son, I didn't want to share, because I had shared a few times and had some, you know, shocking or very unsupportive opinions shared back with me. And I was like, no, I can't handle that. All I can handle in this moment is just coping with the day-to-day and, you know, talking with my very close circle. But then I isolated and I, you know, kept it to myself and didn't share. And so I'm maybe, not that I want to say I'm a part of the problem, but that dynamic is a part of the problem as well.
That's what you do. Yeah. That is why this is so incredibly isolating, because unless you've been through it, you don't understand. And so that's why I think finding someone who's been through it to talk to is really necessary. And then you went through it in COVID even, which I can't imagine. I mean, it's already an isolating situation if you think something was wrong and you were facing this terrible decision and all of this heartbreak possibly. And then it was COVID. So if you did decide, you would have had to go through it all alone anyway.
Yeah. And yeah, if anybody's been through this, like the parts of this process that kind of open up to you and you realize are a thing, like booking a photographer. And do you want a photographer there for your birth and the moments that you have with your child who was born sleeping? And like, they just had to say to me, sorry, we aren't booking photographers for that because of COVID. And so just the not only learning and kind of being hit with that Mac truck of information, but then also to learn that your experience is going to be so different because of the pandemic and the way they were dealing with things.
Yeah, I think it was like an extra punch in the face, I'm sure. And these aren't the things that you Google when you're pregnant, right? Like no one ever Googles like, what would I do if my baby was stillborn, or what would I do if I had a miscarriage? No one Googles that. So then you're just obviously learning on the fly and at the disposal of whoever is around you at the time and the circumstances. So well, I'm so thankful that your sweet boy was born healthy after all, but I know there's lots of parents that didn't get that outcome and are facing some really hard decisions. So
yeah, I think that's part of, that feeling of mistrust too, because I was at like the premier hospital in Vancouver, British Columbia. I was working with excellent doctors. I had, testing, like all the testing that was available to me. They actually wrote a grant to the government, or like a letter pleading my case to have his genetic material sent down to the United States to be tested to see if there was something, a new disorder that hadn't been known of before, and that might explain what was happening to him in utero. So that I had every resource at my disposal. And then he was born perfectly healthy. And to then kind of question, like, well, how much of pregnancy is still such an unknown, right? Even though all these amazing minds can come together and be there to support me, that he was perfectly healthy, that there was nothing wrong with him. And that what if, like the other thing that I think I still one day have to process and unpack is, what if I had terminated? Like I think everybody's decision is a very personal decision. So I could never imagine somebody else's life, but we were definitely questioning what would our quality of life be given what they had kind of described could be his life, where he would be 100% wheelchair bound, never being able to communicate, like very much just in his own world. And like we live in a townhouse with three sets of stairs, and so we'd be moving, and just like all of the what ifs,
all of the logistics.
Yeah. And then now it's like, no, I am 5'3" and he is congenitally short, and that's just yeah.
How did you then take the things that you teach other people about appreciating their body, taking care of their body? How did you take that and apply it to yourself when you were really in a hard season?
I think the first thing that I did was even just recognize that this was happening. now I have a child. And so the second pregnancy was very different, but I got to spend a lot of time on my own in the shower. And, I really wanted to bond with my baby and bond with my pregnant body because it was something I'd yearned for so long. And so just even being with him in the shower and like holding my body just felt really nice. And I almost remember just like being in those moments and being like, okay, how do I get through this with him? How do I trust that my body is going to do what it's going to do, and that we are going to at least have an experience. Like, this pregnancy is not a bad experience, or it's not a total failure or loss if he doesn't survive. I still got to be pregnant with this baby who I know is my son for this number of weeks, and to feel him move. And so trying to kind of focus on, not, I don't want to say like silver line it, or focus on the positive, because I think that can be kind of toxic in the toxic positivity realm. But what were the things that were really special, and how could I honor those experiences? That was something that was important to me. The photographs that I had with my husband and like the three of us together, even just trying to reconnect with that part of myself that didn't know anything yet, that naive, happy, excited, optimistic version of myself. And to just be like, no, she was happy, and that's okay that she was happy. She wasn't stupid for not knowing. She, trying to like really focus on like how negatively I'd been talking to myself about not knowing. And, it's almost like you have to open yourself up to the idea that multiple feelings and multiple realities are a possibility, that you can be excited and joyous and celebrate this pregnancy and be devastated and grieve it. And that both things can be possible at once, and it doesn't have to be all or nothing. The other thing that I've done is, I think so often our bodies, will give us signals of what they need. And, that sadness and that grief that really overwhelmed me made me want to isolate, made me want to be by myself, made me want to, dig into Reddit and go through all of the Reddit profile or subreddits and just be like, I need to find the solution here. And that isolation just put me, on my own, and rather having to find ways to connect and find support. And so rather than laying in bed after work, could I go for a walk with my husband and enjoy that time? Because we had created a really nice kind of routine for ourselves where we went for a walk every evening, because, that was going to help with birth and labor. But to keep up that practice, just because it was also a nice way for us to connect. So it's almost like you have to like radically love your body, even when it doesn't feel like it's loving you.
Yeah. Oh, that's hard to do, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. What are some great self-care? I mean, you mentioned the walking, and what are some other really great self-care practices that you could give for someone who is really struggling with accepting this reality and appreciating their body for what it did do?
Mm-hmm. It's maybe harder for me not to be into my own experience and what was happening for me. And I maybe now need to also include this experience of losing my second child, but taking time to like reconnect with your body. And so showers for me were part of that. Like, we know that bathing and having a nice warm bath and showering can be one piece of that. But, recognizing like what it was that your body did do for you. And so it goes into my body image piece as well, of like my body changed so drastically, and it stretched and moved and everything. And then also with the second baby to not have a reward at the end of that, not be able to celebrate a baby coming from that, but that my body still changed in those 12 weeks. But to say, yeah, my body was amazing and it housed a baby, and I got to be with that baby for that amount of time, and that, like, look at how amazing that body is. So for me, that means like getting closer to my body. And so from self-care, that might be bathing or showering. I love a hot shower. Going for walks is a big one for me. because I like to feel my body move and to appreciate what it can do in that way as well. And really focusing on function and how my body allows me to go through life rather than how it failed in some way.
Mm-hmm. So just really that mindset shift of, here are the positives of my body instead of just looking down at like this empty shell.
Yeah. And I think going to that deeper level too, because it wouldn't be kind of the surface level positivity of like, I like the color of my hair, because I do like the color of my hair, but what is the, like, how does my body like contribute to a life that I love, or how has my body served me in some way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then how do you prepare your body for maybe a new baby?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's where I'm at right now. I've been given the green light to try again. And I almost think that that's like where you have to make that connection between mind and body, because I just suspect that my mind is going to be very worried in those first 12 weeks, and then even those first 20 weeks, that there's nothing promised. And that's the hard reality and the grief that I think you have to go through if you've lost a pregnancy, or if something very serious has been identified later in a pregnancy, that those milestones that everybody believes are the success points, or like, oh, everything's in the clear, is not true. And so it's almost like that cruel reality of, more than you really want to know. And so I think for me, preparing my body means being in the moment and being day by day. And I had a mantra for myself of, today I am pregnant, and today I'm with my baby. And rather than focusing on the future, because there was so much unknown. And so I think that will be something that I'll go into this, hopefully a future pregnancy with, of, today I am pregnant. This is how my body feels today. And so again, not to, sugarcoat things, but to say, today my body is making me morning sick because, or giving me that nausea because it is supporting the life of another person. Today my body is aching because it's expanding for another human being. Today my body is telling me it's tired and it needs rest because it's doing a lot of growing for myself and another person. So I think just trying to honor the little things that my body needs every day, and not try to get ahead of myself, and keep track of, or have self-compassion for the anxiety when it does come up. Because to say, like, of course I am scared of this, of course I have spotting, or I have an appointment coming up that is going to maybe reveal something that I'm scared to know about because I've been here before. And to say, of course, like, I've been there and that was a scary time. That's a totally normal way to react when you've had something really scary happen before and you've had a loss before. You're not silly for being scared. And I always like an and we don't know what is going to happen. We can't predict. We don't have a crystal ball. We need to just, again, stay in today.
I love that. I love having some of those mantras to kind of refer to, because it was, as you were saying, I was imagining, like, it just takes it down a little bit, just takes it down a notch. Like, okay, well, today, and just maybe even doing a daily morning check-in with your body. How am I feeling? What is going on? How can I just kind of rationalize this is what's happening, so that your mind doesn't get hooked on the fear and feeling scared.
Mm-hmm.
And then intuitive eating. So how does that come into play when you do have a loss? So say after a loss, how do you deal with intuitive eating when you were pregnant? Maybe you were eating extra because you were pregnant and now you don't need to, but you also don't want to swing the other way either and not eat enough to sustain and heal yourself physically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And intuitive eating is quite a comprehensive approach. And I, again, value this approach so much because it focuses so much on the relationship with your body. And so there are aspects, like you kind of mentioned, of, physical hunger and the cues that our body gives us. And oftentimes when we are grieving or we are sad, we maybe don't want to eat, and we don't tune into our bodies the same way, especially if you've had this loss and you've been so connected to your body. It can feel really tempting to just push away and disconnect from our bodies and to try to distract ourselves and maybe stay in our minds with that's what worry does. It keeps us in our heads. So, connecting with your body and what you're feeling, and at the same time, recognizing that emotion plays such a big role in how we eat and what we crave. And, there's a whole range of things, whether it's punishing yourself by not eating, punishing yourself by eating more. I've already said I'm like a big fan of Reddit, and I'm in many mom groups just for my own experiences. But the number of women who, really punish themselves for how their bodies have changed during pregnancy and say, I must lose the weight now, and get really frustrated about that. Like, even just recognizing your body has gone through such a hormonal roller coaster, and that it's going to take time for it to recalibrate and settle. So I would say not focusing on weight loss or trying to change your body in the first little bit after losing a baby would be really important. But I think when you are struggling right after, there's this concept called mechanical eating, which it's not a meal plan. It's not following a diet plan or anything like that, which would be restrictive most likely. But it's more so saying, okay, even if I'm feeling really depressed, I know that my body needs nourishment, and I need to make sure that I am nourished well. So does that mean that I'm going to include something that has protein and carbohydrates and fats so that I'm satiated, and that part, I can tick the box off, and I can then focus on my grief and focus on the other things that I have to deal with. But I'm going to just have some simple meals and simple things that I can have. If you do find, because I work quite a bit with women who struggle with emotional eating and overeating, that's really normal, right? You go through your whole day, and especially if, like we were talking about earlier, that you don't talk about loss the same way. And so you might keep on this like happy mask, or, a mask of functioning throughout the day. And then by the evening, it's like, I get to take the mask off. I get to put my feet up and relax. And now my grief hits me, and maybe I eat to cope with that. And so first, just recognizing that. But then I think that's where bringing in some of those self-care activities are so necessary to pre-plan, to say, maybe rather than, binging on Netflix every single night, I'm going to choose one night a week that I do yoga, or, try to reconnect with my body, or I go for a walk, or I try to, have a phone call with a friend, or my partner and I play a board game, or just something else to break up and cope with grief in a different way. Because it tends to be those habits that are the space that we can then, just lean on food and cope with our emotions in that way. But then have so much compassion for yourself, because it is almost remarkable that our bodies will find ways to cope. And if coping with food is that way, that's easy and accessible, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. I'm sure it's probably a common occurrence for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. What would be a great way to reconnect with your body if you are feeling like, I'm so angry, and I'm self-sabotaging maybe with my eating because of it, and I'm angry and I just can't trust my body? What would you recommend?
Mm-hmm. I think, again, as a counselor, I think it's important to, look at that anger and where it comes from, because that anger is trying to tell us something, right? It's trying to tell us maybe that things felt unfair. Mm-hmm. Things did not work out the way we felt we were promised, and that, we are upset with that. And maybe even just recognizing that anger is totally justified, but maybe it's not our body's fault. Maybe it's society's fault that we weren't informed, that we didn't have all the information about the possibility of what can happen in pregnancy. And that's not our body's fault. Our bodies were doing the very best that they could. And there's, still that massive piece of unknown. And if you're spiritual, even that, we can't predict all of those things. There is maybe another plan or another piece that we just don't know about. And that's not a reflection of our body doing anything wrong. So I think first focusing on why we're directing our anger at our bodies when maybe it needs to go elsewhere. And then instead trying to focus on that. I always think my business is called parallel wellness, but like thinking about how we go through life in parallel with our bodies, that as much as we wanted this pregnancy, our bodies likely wanted this pregnancy too, right? The reason my body didn't let go of that pregnancy for 3 weeks and I didn't know that I wasn't pregnant was because my body was trying to make it work. And,
Yeah. Oh, that's good. I love that. Yeah.
the
That's
genetics
so
or whatever.
helpful because
Yeah.
there's so many unexplained things. And I truly believe our bodies are trying. They're doing everything they know. So much so that it takes a while for your body to tell your brain that you're no longer pregnant.
Mm-hmm. And like, again, this is my own recovery part of all this and my process, but I will feel phantom movements in my stomach still. And I know I'm not pregnant. I'm definitely not pregnant. But yeah, just that feeling. And I think maybe, just that hope of what could have been. So almost going from it as a perspective of like grieving with your body, that we both are sad about that loss. And we both need to work together on this, whether that's, let's focus on improving our mental health by doing things that we need to do for us to feel emotionally better and focusing. So that was something else that I had, is that, having a 16-month-old, I have not taken care of myself very well. I've put his needs so far ahead of mine. And when I had this miscarriage, I said to myself and my husband actually of, what I think now is a time for me. I think I was really gearing myself up for being pregnant and how much I would have to give of my body again. And honestly, the fear of having a newborn again, and knowing what all those sleepless nights will be like. But now I think it's time for me. Until I get back into that place, I think I need to focus on me. So what do I want to do? I was saying, let's go for walks with the baby. And that's what he needs. It's a way for both of us to be outside. But now I think I need to put aside, time for me to go do something just for me. And so my movement looks different. Maybe it's booking a yoga class and going in and doing that, or booking a massage for myself to reconnect with my body and just feel that positivity and connection with myself, that we're doing this together and that we need some connection time too.
Nice. Well, I'm excited for you. I know that you're going to take care of yourself, and that if another child is what you want, then that's going to be a really exciting time. So thank you so much. I mean, there were so many great nuggets of wisdom in here, and I know this is such a hard relationship to get back to. And I think you've given us some really great things to think about and take into consideration as you're grieving and as you're working through the process of trying to make peace with everything. Where can people find you? How you are helping and what kind of work you're doing?
Yeah, so I primarily work with women who struggle with emotional eating and binge eating through an intuitive eating perspective. And so probably my most popular home is my YouTube channel, and it's under Meredith MacKenzie, /parallel wellness, which is my business name. And I'm also on Instagram, and my handle is @parallel wellness.
Your YouTube videos are incredible. They're so, so helpful. So yeah, if that is something that anyone is struggling with, I'm definitely going to recommend that they check you out there. And so thank you so much for being here and being willing to share your story and everything that you shared with us today. I so appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Like, it had my own little counseling session now.
Good.